Most people imagine that irresistible allure is hidden in beauty, in the body's curves, in the fragrance one wears, or in the perfection of carefully chosen words. But that belief is an illusion. Real magnetism has little to do with surface appearances and everything to do with unseen energy. As Jung revealed, what you repress ends up ruling you, but what you embrace begins to shine through you. And it is this invisible radiance, the quiet electricity of a soul at peace with itself, that creates true attraction. The truth is, what makes someone unforgettable has almost nothing to do with how they look, and everything to do with the energy that lives inside them. A person may have the most symmetrical features, the most enviable figure, but if behind those features hides insecurity, fear, or desperation, that beauty dissolves into something hollow. On the other hand, someone who carries themselves with presence, even if their face is ordinary, even if their clothes are simple, becomes magnetic, almost impossible to ignore. Because magnetism does not shout. It hums beneath the surface, like a current you cannot see, but can feel with every nerve of your body. Think of those moments when silence becomes more powerful than words. When someone looks at you, not in a hurried, desperate way, but with a gaze that feels like it pierces through layers you didn't know you had. In that instant, you feel seen, not for your mask, but for your essence. That is what magnetism feels like. It is not the flash of charm, but the weight of depth. It is not about what is shown, but about what is carried within. This is why those who learn to live with their shadows, instead of burying them, shine in ways others cannot. Jung understood this deeply. He taught that the unconscious is not a vault we can ignore, but a living reservoir that continues to act upon us, whether we like it or not. Everything we hide, every urge we deny, every fear we suppress, continues to live within us. And when a person integrates this darkness instead of fleeing from it, something miraculous happens. Their very being begins to radiate an authenticity that cannot be faked. You sense it the moment you meet them, that they have depth, that they have lived, that they carry truths most people run from. That is why beauty without depth often collapses so quickly, because the body can only ever express what the soul contains. No amount of rehearsed gestures or borrowed styles can create true magnetism if the energy behind it is fragile. You can imitate the smile, the laugh, the posture of someone magnetic, but without the inner substance, it will always feel hollow. The unconscious of others knows immediately what is real and what is not. So if you wish to cultivate magnetism, the first step is not to learn how to act, but how to be. Jung taught that people filled with unresolved complexes radiate confusion without ever saying a word, but those who integrate their fragments, who reconcile the different pieces of themselves, radiate order. They radiate harmony. They radiate peace. And peace is profoundly attractive in a world where most people live in chaos. One of the most overlooked truths about magnetism is this: it begins in silence. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it with words, with explanations, with reassurances, afraid that silence means emptiness. But silence, when mastered, becomes the ground of presence. The most magnetic people are those who can sit in silence without flinching, who do not bend under the weight of another's gaze, who do not scramble to prove they belong. When you can carry silence with strength, you carry power. Because silence makes others lean in, curious, unsettled, intrigued. And curiosity is the doorway to desire. Notice how slowness commands attention. The one who rushes to speak, to explain, to impress, loses power, because their energy is reactive. But the one who is slow, the one who takes their time, sets the rhythm. and whoever controls the rhythm controls the field. This is why those who do not chase approval, who do not run after validation, often become the most attractive. They embody fullness, not lack. They are not trying to get something from you. They are offering something through their presence. And in that state, they shift from seeker to source. This is not arrogance. It is harmony. It is the quiet fullness of someone who has nothing to prove. They become like the archetype of the sage, light in movement, rooted in being. Their energy feels whole, and wholeness is magnetic because most people are fractured. Jung reminded us that our vital energy, what he called libido, was not merely sexual, but the very essence of life. Where you direct it determines your power. Those who invest it in observing rather than performing begin to see what others cannot. They sense subtle details, the flicker of emotion in an eye, the hesitation in a breath. And whoever sees deeply also touches deeply. That is magnetism, not the performance of charm, but the ability to touch the invisible. But here lies the trap. We often confuse attention with presence. We think that to be magnetic is to be the loudest voice, the one who dominates the room. Yet true presence has nothing to do with how many people look at you. It has everything to do with how much your energy influences the space, even in silence. A truly magnetic person does not always stand in the spotlight. They are unforgettable, because even when absent, they are felt. Their silence echoes louder than the noise of others. And so, magnetism thrives in restraint, in the tension of what is not yet given. When you could speak but remain silent, when you could reach out but wait, when you could reveal but choose to suggest. Instead, that is when desire begins to burn. Neuroscience even confirms this. It is not the reward itself that excites the brain, but the anticipation of it. Expectation ignites the fire. Whoever masters expectation masters desire. This is the dance Jung spoke of, the tension of opposites. Seduction itself is born in this dance. Approach and retreat, closeness and distance, mystery and revelation. Most people rush to secure everything at once, to explain, to reveal, to guarantee. But magnetism lies in suggestion, not explanation, in mystery, not clarity, because what is fully explained dies, but what is hinted at, what is left unfinished, lives on in the imagination. Magnetism is never about pouring everything out at once. When you give your entire story, your emotions, your body, your attention without restraint, you flood the field and leave no room for mystery. And where there is no mystery, there can be no desire. Desire is born from the unknown, from what lingers just out of reach, close enough to feel but not fully grasp. That is why the most magnetic people are masters of suggestion. They leave traces, not maps. They offer glimpses, not confessions. And those glimpses are enough to ignite entire worlds in the imagination of the other. Jung understood that the unconscious speaks in symbols. A magnetic person becomes a living symbol. Their pauses, their enigmatic looks, their ambiguous gestures, they all carry more weight than words. You cannot fake this because the unconscious of the other senses immediately what is authentic and what is manufactured. When someone who has mastered themselves holds back, every movement becomes charged with meaning. Their gaze feels deeper, their touch more deliberate, their very breath heavier with intention. This is why people remember them long after the moment has passed. The body may forget the details, but the psyche never forgets the impression. Presence, then, is not about noise, but about density. Magnetic people are not those who scatter their energy everywhere, but those who gather it within. Their silence feels alive. Their smallest gesture feels deliberate. And when they choose to break that silence, to move, to touch, it lands with unforgettable weight. Jung often spoke of archetypes that live in the collective unconscious. When you embody one of these patterns, whether it is the calm sage, the mysterious huntress, or the silent warrior, you become larger than yourself. You no longer exist only as an individual, but as a symbol that resonates with something ancient in others. And archetypes are never forgotten. But this energy is not only about presence, it is about rhythm. Magnetism lives in rhythm, in the delicate timing between closeness and distance. There is always a right moment for intimacy, a right moment for withdrawal, a right moment for silence to transform into touch. Magnetic people feel this rhythm like a dancer feels music. They do not rush, they do not stumble, they wait until the exact instant when the heart is open and longing. This is what Jung called synchronicity, the mysterious alignment between inner and outer worlds. It is not imitation that creates this rhythm, but deep attention. Only when you are collected within yourself can you sense the invisible field between you and the other. You notice when eyes silently ask for your presence. You sense when the body softens before it moves. And when you respond at exactly that moment, you create an emotional memory. The other may not understand why it felt so powerful, but they will never forget it, because the psyche does not cling to what is complete. It clings to what remains unfinished. The memory that haunts us is not the one wrapped neatly in closure, but the one that left us wanting more. This is why absence is as powerful as presence. Most believe attraction is built through constant availability, through being always present, always accessible. But constancy dulls the senses. The nervous system adapts, and the spark fades. Magnetism understands the opposite. Withdrawal at the right moment sharpens desire. Disappearance creates presence in the imagination. The ghost of someone becomes stronger than their physical body because it lives in dreams, in fantasies, in projections. Jung once said that where there is no consciousness, fate manifests. And in absence, projection flourishes. When you step away at the height of closeness, you become not a body, but a symbol. And symbols are far more powerful than people. But this absence must not be cruel. It must not be used to punish or manipulate. True magnetism withdraws with elegance. It is a gesture of trust, trusting that the space you leave behind will speak louder than your presence. It is an invitation, not a rejection. The question it leaves hanging in the air is simple. Do you still feel me, even when I am not here? If the answer is yes, the bond is no longer physical. It is psychic, and bonds born in the psyche are far more enduring than those born in the flesh. Touch, too, becomes transformed when magnetism is present. Most people touch without thought, out of reflex, out of need. But a magnetic touch arises not from need, but from intention. It is slow, deliberate, symbolic. A simple brush of the fingers, a hand resting lightly on a shoulder, a pause before contact. All of these gestures, when filled with presence, become unforgettable, because they are not mere actions, they are transmissions. Jung said the body carries psychic content, which means every gesture carries meaning. Every touch is an unspoken message. The unconscious feels it, long before the mind interprets it. Magnetic people do not touch often, but when they do, the body of the other remembers. Their touch awakens ancient circuits of the brain, primal areas that respond not to logic, but to sensation. The rhythm of a breath, the warmth of skin, the stillness before movement. These things bypass the rational mind and go straight into instinct. That is why a single touch from the right person can linger for years, while hundreds from another vanish instantly. But here is the paradox. Desire always pushes us toward haste. We want to leap, to claim, to consume. And yet magnetism is born of restraint. Not repression, but mastery. Jung never saw desire as the enemy. He saw it as raw material, energy that must be transformed. When you master the fire of desire, instead of extinguishing it, it refines into presence. It becomes the electricity in your gaze, the quiet force in your breath, the unspoken charge in your silence. The fire remains, but it no longer consumes. It illuminates. And so magnetism is never about abundance of gestures, of words, of appearances. It is about density, the density of energy held within, the silence that feels full, not empty, the absence that feels alive, not dead, the touch that carries intention, not impulse. This is why magnetic people do not overwhelm, they enchant. They do not explain, they suggest. They do not flood, they leave traces. And in those traces, the imagination of the other does the rest. What is unforgettable is never the obvious. It is what remains unsolved. It is the mystery that lingers in the psyche like a dream half remembered, one that you keep trying to interpret long after waking. Magnetism fades the moment it becomes predictable. The unconscious mind longs for movement, for surprise, for renewal. This is why relationships often do not die from lack of love, but from repetition. When every meeting feels the same, when every word follows a script, when every touch repeats the last, desire begins to dissolve. Human beings are wired for variation, for the thrill of discovery. Jung described psychic energy as moving in spirals, not straight lines. And so, when energy repeats too often, it becomes flat. It turns into routine, and routine numbs the senses. To remain magnetic, one must resist the comfort of repetition. Never give the same energy twice. Sometimes your presence must feel like fire, other times like a soft fog, sometimes like a steady anchor, other times like a gust of wind. This does not mean changing who you are. It means learning to shift the vibration, to create variations within the same essence. That way, the other can never fully decode you. They always feel there is more to uncover, something they have not yet touched. And it is this sense of not yet complete that keeps desire alive. Magnetism, then, lives on the boundary between the familiar and the mysterious. Too much mystery creates fear. Too much familiarity creates boredom. But when you balance the two, you create a living tension that keeps the soul awake. The unconscious does not crave perfection. It craves discovery. And those who embody this subtle art become unforgettable, not because they give everything, but because they never stop revealing new layers of themselves. But magnetism also speaks to something deeper, something older than thought. It speaks to instinct. The conscious mind is slow, logical, critical. But attraction is born in the ancient brain, in the senses, in smell, in touch, in rhythm. That is why the smallest details can have the most powerful impact. The way your breath syncs with another's, the cadence of your voice, the rhythm of your steps. When you enter a room, all of it is registered beneath awareness. The body of the other is listening even when their mind is not. Jung believed that within us lies not just the personal psyche, but the collective unconscious, the timeless memory of humanity itself. And when you embody certain archetypes, the quiet sage, the intuitive goddess, the watchful protector, you awaken instincts that go back thousands of years. You are no longer only yourself. You become a doorway into something older, deeper, larger. This is why certain forms of presence touch us so profoundly. They do not speak to our ego. They speak to our bones. A gaze, for example, can carry this power. Not a frantic stare, not a timid glance, but a gaze that lingers just a fraction longer than expected. It touches without contact. It plants possibilities without words. And where there are possibilities, imagination awakens. Imagination is the greatest fuel of desire. A kiss can fade. A gaze can haunt, because it is not bound to skin, but to symbol. It activates chemistry in the brain. Dopamine, oxytocin, adrenaline, all without a single touch. That is magnetism at its purest. The most magnetic people, then, become not simply individuals, but experiences. They weave a signature that no one else can replicate. It may be the way they pause before they speak, the rhythm of their laughter, the silence before a kiss, the tenderness of a hand placed at the right moment. Over time, this becomes a pattern etched into the nervous system of the other. And then absence becomes unbearable, not because of what is missing in the body, but because of what is missing in the field. You do not long for a person. You long for that vibration, the one no one else can create. That is what makes someone unforgettable. But none of this means suppressing desire. In fact, desire is essential. What kills magnetism is not the presence of desire, but the lack of mastery over it. Too often we think self-control means emptiness, detachment, coldness. But the opposite is true. True magnetism comes from desiring deeply, from letting that fire live in your eyes, in your voice, in your very breath, but without rushing to extinguish it in gratification. It is the art of holding the flame without burning yourself or others. Jung compared this process to alchemy, the transformation of raw material into something precious. Desire is raw fire. It is only when mastered, refined, elevated, that it becomes magnetism. The person who masters their own fire does not consume. They illuminate. They warm the air. They charge the atmosphere. They linger in memory like a hidden ember that refuses to die. And then something extraordinary happens. You stop being an ordinary man, an ordinary woman, and you become a reference point in the emotional life of another. A symbol, a presence that shifts their very way of being. Your touch echoes on their skin long after it is gone. Your silence vibrates in their mind long after the words have faded, because everything you did with presence, and presence is the rarest gift in a fragmented world. Most people live scattered, fragmented, drowning in noise, enslaved by performance. But the one who is whole becomes medicine. They heal simply by being. They make others feel more complete without ever trying. Their magnetism ceases to be mere attraction. It becomes transcendence. It transforms seduction into elevation, desire into inspiration. At this stage, you're no longer trying to conquer anyone. You have become a symbol, a mirror through which the unconscious of the other glimpses its own path of growth. This is the highest form of magnetism, not the possession of bodies, but the awakening of souls. Not the guarantee of presence, but the leaving of a legacy. And once you understand this, you can never return to shallow games. For you will know that true magnetism does not need manipulation, does not beg for attention, does not chase applause. It simply is. It lives in the density of your presence, in the depth of your silence, in the wholeness of your being. From now on, your silence will no longer be empty. It will carry weight. Your absence will no longer be void. It will be presence in another form. And when you choose to appear, to speak, to touch, the world around you will shift. Not because you demanded attention, but because your energy is undeniable. You will cease to be just another experience. You will become the experience. The one that shapes dreams, lingers in memory, and leaves an imprint long after the moment is gone. Because magnetism, when mastered, is not just attraction, it is transformation. And so the question remains, do you wish merely to be desired, or do you wish to be unforgettable? The choice is yours.